You are welcome to Export Digest, the #1 program that periscopes Nigeria's non-oil sector. On Export Digest, we bring you information that helps you see economic possibilities in non-oil export, a sector we know is Nigeria's alternative source of foreign exchange earnings. On the program, we highlight several opportunities and explore strategies to exploit these opportunities as we seek to identify and profile solutions to challenges in the sector. Our goal is to enable practitioners and policymakers improve on their respective roles as it relates to export business. My name is Mayoko Apoterabo. Non-oil exports remains Nigeria's alternative source of foreign exchange. You also can be a big player by knowing how and what it takes to engage in profitable non-oil export business. Export Digest features experts with local and global knowledge of non-oil export business, presenting you with everything you ever need to know. Non-oil items you can export, important tips on export packaging, export documentation and regulatory standards, logistics and transportation issues from farm gate to the port and then destination country, export funding and available markets for different commodities, products and services. Don't miss Export Digest, showing on NTA News 24 Tuesdays at 7:30 p.m. with a repeat broadcast Fridays at 8:30 p.m. Export Digest, promoting Nigeria's non-oil export sector.
My name is Ken Okauha, the president of the National Association of Nigerian Traders, NANS.
I have been a C. Urwapa, personal development trainer, public affairs analyst, and an entrepreneur.
Keep watching
Export Digest.
Export Digest.
Don't change it out.
So much has been said about federal government creating a basket of incentives as support for non-oil exports. It is apt for us to appraise things by taking an in-depth look at the different incentives that exist, so we can together understand their dynamics and how they serve the Nigerian exporter. To do a thorough job, however, we must start from the many incentives created over the years. Some are inactive, while others have been reviewed, suspended, or outrightly cancelled. Olufemi Boyede, a certified international trade professional and MD/CEO of Koinuna Ventures Limited, joins us as we welcome you, our viewer, on this journey of tracking Nigeria's support for non-oil exports.
I'm Magdalene Palmer.
My name is Toy Yunasiri. I'm based in the US.
I'm Ken from Ken Italy.
Keep watching Export Digest.
And I would recommend very strongly that you come along.
Keep watching Export Digest.
Let's begin. How many non-oil export incentives have been created so far? Which ones have been rested? Which ones are active?
At the onset in 1986, 18 different incentives were earmarked to support export activity in Nigeria. But over the past 10 years or so, just one has overtaken the others and has remained most prominent and therefore most contentious, the Export Expansion Grant. But what are the incentives that existed either side by side with the EEG or that were also practiced at one point or the other? So I'm probably going to take the EEG last, and for obvious reasons you have heard so much about it.
Let's take the incentives one after another and review how well or not they have served to support Nigeria's non-oil export businesses.
The duty drawback and duty suspension scheme was one of the most viral incentives for export in Nigeria. And I believe that this is an incentive scheme that is practiced still, that is administered by about 45 to 50% of other countries that want to increase the competitiveness of their exports. What is the duty drawback or duty suspension scheme? It simply means that a manufacturer can bring in all its raw materials and pay all the duties that it is supposed to pay, collect all the documents that it used to pay the duty, and go to the Nigeria Customs Service to go and apply for a refund of the import duties paid. The condition, however, is that such raw material would have been used in manufacturing for export. And when it was in operation, the company that was participating in duty drawback definitely had to do an entry of premises for duty drawback. What this means is that the company has a specific warehouse where the raw materials imported for export manufacture are stored, and that warehouse is designated and under lock and key. The customs has a record of the raw materials that went in there, the quantity, the import duties paid. And at the end of the manufacturing process, there is another warehouse, a finished goods store, that is specifically designated to warehouse the goods that were manufactured using that raw material. And then at the point of export, there is the export documents that shows. And therefore, there is a reconciliation to be done between the quantity of raw material input and the finished product that was exported. Once all these documents are put together, you go to the Duty Drawback Secretariat. It was located in the Nigeria Export Promotion Council, just like the EEG. It is the Secretariat that now distributes the documents for your claims and gets the respective agencies, i.e. the Customs Service that witnessed the importation and received the duty, and the Central Bank of Nigeria that received and confirmed the repatriation of export proceeds, and the Nigeria Export Promotion Council, of course, that is the warehouse of all of this. Based on this, I think the Duty Drawback Committee used to meet about 4 times a year. Then the company is refunded the entirety of the duty that it paid for the component of raw material that was used in manufacturing for export. Of course, it means that if some of it was sold locally, the company would not get the duty refunded. And if you have claimed duty drawback 3-4 times, that is when you qualify for duty suspension, because there would have been a track record of your usage of imported raw materials. So based on this track record, the company is actually allowed to be suspended from payment of import duty. All you need to be doing is to reconcile the raw materials imported and the finished goods exported, and you reconcile that with the Customs Service at every point in time. Of course, for accountability reasons, the companies were not only expected to do an entry of premises, they were also expected to raise a bond when they are going up to the level of suspension. The duty drawback, like I said, encourages what government is now thinking of: value-added export. An exporter of raw agricultural commodities can never benefit from duty drawback. And therefore, if it is an instrument that government is thinking of reintroducing, government should understand that this will be a step in the right direction, because it will encourage more industries to now go back, knowing fully well that they can get back their import duties. And I think this is a more direct administration and implementation than the export expansion grant. Closely related to the duty drawback in those days was the manufacture in bond scheme. The manufacture in bond scheme was also another incentive that functioned properly and relatively smoothly as long as it was still in existence. The manufacture in bond scheme actually allowed an exporter to bring in raw material and produce specifically for export. So because of the bond that was already, that was woven around the MIBS, that was the acronym, Manufacture in Bond Scheme, it was possible to import even prohibited items of raw materials because it was expected that you were just using Nigeria as the industrial base. And from there we derived our philosophy of encouraging Nigeria to become an industrial outpost. Under the manufacture in bond scheme, for example, companies were allowed to bring in ethyl alcohol, raw ethyl and methyl alcohol. You got the import permit from the Nigeria Customs Service to bring in raw alcohol because you are going to refine it and use it to produce brandies and whiskies that were exported to the West Coast. Just as an example, a lot of other materials, for example, under the textile segment, there were specific, what do you call them now, threads that were ordinarily banned from being imported, but because they were going to be used for embroidery for garments that were going out for export, you could bring them in under bond. And just like we said in the duty drawback scheme, the suspension level of the duty drawback scheme, under the manufacture in bond scheme, a company actually takes out a bond up to 110% of the import duty that ordinarily she would have paid if she was just to import directly. It's just a matter of a bond, and these bonds were discharged on an annual basis. So you could put your bond in place at the beginning of the year, continue to import your items of raw materials and export. There was this system of jacking off. If, for example, you were given permit to bring in 30,000 liters of methyl alcohol, how many liters of spirits, refined alcoholic spirits, did you export? So there was always a reconciliation process that was going on. Somewhere along the line, I think somebody got it all wrong and decided to combine another incentive, which we will come to shortly. That's the next one I want to talk about, the export processing factory. Combined it with the manufacture in bond and came up with what they call the manufacturer exporter in bond scheme. And of course, just as clumsy as it is in the pronunciation, so clumsy was it that nobody, not a single company, ever understood what it was intended for. Nobody ever went to the Nigeria Customs Service to apply for the manufacturer exporter in bond scheme.
How interesting. I believe policymakers and stakeholders who are watching this episode particularly will find the information being churned out relevant to discussions and ongoing efforts on improving Nigeria's trade. There is more.
The export processing factory status, EPF status, was another variant of an export incentive under policy, under the NEBSA policy. Ordinarily, the understanding of export processing zones is an enclave, more like a common facility center, like the export processing zones in Calabar, for example, where companies can decide to go and locate their operations, and whatever they were producing in the export processing zones, at least a minimum of 75% of this is expected to be exported. There was no problem with locating your operations into the EPZ, Export Processing Zone. But the authorities came up with another policy that allowed a company to become an export processing factory and enjoy the full benefits of operating in the enclave that government had spent money to build, provided that this company could guarantee by the height of its fence, by locating a Nigeria Customs Service post, by providing an office for a representative of the Nigeria Export Processing Zones Authority to monitor the importation of machinery, equipment, raw materials, etc., just like they will be in the export processing zones. Once it was established that whatever comes into this factory would only leave as a finished product going to the port for export, then such a factory was allowed to be licensed as an export processing factory with the same status as a company that is located in the export processing zone. This, of course, has been discontinued since the merger of the scheme with the manufacture inbound scheme. As a country that uses policy to drive exports, Nigeria, we believe at Export Digest, needs to revisit a policy like the export processing factory, because ordinarily it was actually a very big incentive, because it cut short the wait time at the port to clear whatever was coming. Every port procedure was already completed ahead of arrival once all of the imports were labeled EPF. If, for example, it's going to Buhari Export Processing Factory, you have Buhari EPF. The companies were very, very excited to be licensed as EPF because it actually conveyed on them the status of a diplomat. They would have their own license plates, green license plate. Let's use Buhari again, Buhari EPF. That would be the license plate. They could import everything that they needed in there free of duty. Their struggle to get expatriate quota was reduced. And all of this, just like we said in our benchmarking of incentives, it is deliberate effort of government to make life easy for manufacturing for export. And we believe that sometime very, very soon, desirably, government should be able to, or the Nigeria Export Processing Zones Authority should be able to revise or revisit the export processing factory status and make it available and accessible just like its special economic zones. There was the provision for tax rebate for banks that lent money to exporters. I hope that is not too complicated to explain. Banks that could prove that they were financing exports, for every export financing that they gave, they were entitled to some form of tax, corporate tax rebate at the end of the year. And of course, you understand what that means. It made the banks more excited to lend to exporters to carry out the export activity. More like the global trend in approving carbon credits for people who are able to save the environment from pollution by going green. Biofuels, biodiesel, and all of that. Whenever you talk about investment in them, you also have the opportunity of going to claim carbon credits for saving the environment. That was the same incentive that the banks were enjoying. I'm not too sure there are any banks any longer who are enjoying any tax rebate for lending for export activity. But I believe that that is one of the things that used to help Nigerian exporters in those days. And then you will see on the approach, or at the approach of every commodity season, cocoa season for example, you will see the bank actually organize sensitization workshops for exporters engaged in cocoa activity, usually held in Akure, the cocoa production center of Nigeria, ahead of the main crop cocoa season, in order to ensure that there were many more exporters participating in cocoa export during that season. Of course, they knew that they were going back to collect an incentive based on how much they were able to lend out. During the 3 years of the Nigerian Non-Oil Export Conference Exhibition and Award, Zenith Bank again emerged at that time as the most exporter-friendly bank. I am not too sure if they were able to get the tax rebate. Again, I think and I hope that somebody from CBN is watching this particular episode, because we believe that this is one of the incentives that will rub off very positively on export financing in Nigeria.
To enable Nigerians optimize the benefits from the country's vast agricultural products such as cassava, oil palm, rice, tomatoes and others, the Bank of Industry has launched a 5 billion naira cottage agro-processing fund, the CAP Fund. Customers can access the fund to establish plans to process our various agro-produce into food products or intermediate raw materials for industries at a single-digit interest rate of 9% per annum. For more information on the CAP Fund, please visit www.boinigeria.com/capfund. Bank of Industry, developing Nigeria's agro-processing industry through the CAP Fund.
Non-oil exports remains Nigeria's alternative source of foreign exchange. You also can be a big player by knowing how and what it takes to engage in profitable non-oil export business. Export Digest features experts with local and global knowledge of non-oil export business, presenting you with everything you ever need to know. Non-oil items you can export, important tips on export packaging, export documentation and regulatory standards, logistics and transportation issues from farm gate to the port and then destination country, export funding and available markets for different commodities, products and services. Don't miss Export Digest, showing on NTA News 24 Tuesdays at 7:30 p.m. with a repeat broadcast Fridays at 8:30 p.m. Export Digest, promoting Nigeria's non-oil export sector. The Corporate Affairs Commission offers services that first off confer a legal status on your business. Hear them.
Initially, it was only in Abuja that you can start a company directly. Otherwise, you have to go through our state offices. From there, you send the files physically to us in Abuja, and then when we register now, send back certificate to them, and they will give you, and that takes time. But now we have decentralized our operations. Apart from Abuja office, Lagos office can do the same thing that we can do here. In Lagos, we have two offices, both Yawa and Alausa. The Yawa has now moved to Marina. And then we have in the north, we have Kano and in Kaduna. We have in the south again, we have Enugu and we have Port Harcourt. In all these offices, you can start and finish your registration there without having to come to Abuja, and you get the certificates right there. That's one achievements, and we are going to, within this year, spread this all over the country. Wherever you go in the offices, you can register there. Initially, it was only business that you can register, but now you can register even companies, limited liability companies in our offices. That's the centralization of our operations, and you can start and finish there. Then we have initiated a reduction of filing fees. This is in conjunction with the Ministry of Commerce or Trade. our fees have been reduced by about 50%. Those who register companies from 2 million to 500 million, they enjoy a reduction of 50% of our filing fees. And those registering from 500 million above, they enjoy 25% reduction. So the fees have been slashed. And then we now have what we call new company registration portal called CRP. Initially, the one that we had, it has some problems. You cannot use it online. It's only being used internally. But now the one that we have, the new one that we have, is that lawyers and other customers can start business with us from the comfort of their offices. That means anywhere you are, even if you're out of the country, you can assist us and do registration online.
I'm Magdalene Palmer.
My name is Toyin Yunusiri. I'm based in the US.
I'm Ken from Ken Italy.
Keep watching Export Digest.
And I would recommend very strongly that you come along.
Keep watching Export Digest.
This is how much we can squeeze into today's episode of Export Digest. We believe the program has improved your knowledge of non-oil export business in Nigeria. Thank you for joining us today. You can watch this particular episode and others before it on our YouTube channel, www.youtube.com/Export Digest. Do send in your comments, observations, and contributions as we continue on our march towards making Nigeria a viable exporting nation and to lead our viewers into profitable export businesses. Our channels of communication are open and now showing on your screen. Many thanks to our support. You also can advertise on Export Digest. Contact us today and let us grow your business with you. Do join us same time on this station for another educative episode of Export Digest. My name is Mayoko Akwaterabo. God bless you and God bless Nigeria.